The late afternoon sun spilled across the barracks, casting long shadows over the chipped green doors that lined the narrow corridor. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and dust, the kind of scent that lingered in old buildings no matter how often they were scrubbed. Ana Reyes moved slowly, her steps steady, her breath quiet. In her right hand, she carried a worn paintbrush, the bristles darkened from years of use. A metal bucket of paint clinked softly against her leg with each measured stride. At 58, she carried the weight of her years in her shoulders, but her hands never trembled. They had learned long ago how to stay steady. She knelt by the first door, dipped her brush into the pale green paint, and smoothed it over the wood. The sound was soft, a whisper of bristle against surface, a rhythm she had come to know well. She worked without haste, without apology, as if the door itself deserved the same patience and care as anything else in her life. Her faded workshirt was flecked with older stains, colors of jobs long finished, ghosts of other repairs. Her shoes were scuffed and heavy, soles worn thin from years of walking floors just like these. A few feet away, 5 recruits leaned against the wall, watching her with the smug curiosity of youth. Their uniforms were crisp, their boots polished to a shine, their eyes full of the restless energy of men not yet tested. One nudged the other, grinning. "Look at her! They got someone's grandma painting doors now?" Another smirked. Bet she got lost on her way to the cafeteria. Their laughter was low but sharp, meant to stay private, though loud enough for her to hear. Anna kept her back to them, her brush moving in slow, deliberate strokes. She did not pause. She did not let her grip falter. She had long ago learned that silence could be the strongest shield. "Check out her shoes," a third recruit whispered, mimicking her slow shuffle. "She probably takes all day just to do one door." The others chuckled, their voices rising with the confidence of a pack. A few soldiers passing through cast quick glances toward the scene, some shaking their heads, some pretending not to notice at all. The corridor was filled with the sound of paint against wood, laughter echoing behind it like an unwelcome chorus. Anna shifted slightly, lifting her arm to reach the upper panel of the door. Her sleeve slipped back as she stretched, just enough for the skin of her wrist to catch the light. The recruits saw it at once, a mark inked into her flesh, faded with age, but still unmistakable. A small trident symbol, simple in its lines, yet holding a gravity they did not understand. Beneath it, numbers etched in black, blurred at the edges by time. The laughter wavered for a moment, but only just. They didn't know what they were looking at. To them, it was nothing more than an old tattoo on an older woman. Anna lowered her arm again, the sleeve falling back into place, the moment gone. Her face remained calm, her expression unchanged. She dipped her brush once more and kept painting. The recruits whispered again, though with less certainty this time. Something about the way she carried herself, the steadiness of her hand, the quiet resolve in her posture seemed to push against their mockery. But still they snickered, filling the hall with the careless noise of men who had yet to learn what respect truly meant. Ana Reyes said nothing. She did not glare or defend herself. She did not rush to prove her worth. Instead, she gave the door before her the gift of another careful stroke, as if the world around her did not exist at all. In her silence was something heavier than words, something the young men would not yet understand, but would soon never forget. The corridor had settled into its usual rhythm boots against tile, doors creaking open, muted conversation drifting down the hall. Ana Reyes kept her place at the far end, her brush gliding across the wood as if each door were a canvas meant to outlast her. The recruits had grown restless with their own mockery, their laughter softening into whispers and half-hearted jokes, though none of them carried the sharpness they had before. The tattoo they had glimpsed remained an afterthought to them, a curiosity dismissed as the whim of someone trying to look younger once upon a time. But not everyone who passed by was so blind. The heavy thud of measured footsteps carried into the hall, a sound that drew instinctive attention even before the man appeared. Commander Jack Harlan moved with a presence that seemed to fill the narrow space. His uniform was dark, marked with ribbons and patches that spoke not only of service but of survival. His hair had grayed at the temples, his face lined by years that could not be softened by rest. He didn't look left or right as he walked, his stride purposeful, steady, the kind of walk that made younger men straighten their shoulders without realizing why. As he passed the group of recruits, their joking fell quiet. Harlan's gaze was sharp, trained by years of seeing what others overlooked, and it fell directly on Anna. His eyes lingered just long enough to notice the way her sleeve shifted again when she reached upward, the paintbrush steady in her hand. The light caught the ink on her wrist, the trident, faded but unmistakable, with numbers curled beneath it like a shadow etched in memory. Jack stopped mid-stride. It was not the kind of tattoo one picked up for fashion, not the kind of thing found in street parlors or college dorm rooms. That mark carried weight, history, and a bond that went beyond what most men could ever claim. His throat tightened as recognition rushed through him, unbidden but undeniable. He had seen it before on the arms of those few who had worked alongside them in the field, medics who had been more than nurses, who had been brothers and sisters in the mud, blood, and fire. The recruits shifted uneasily, watching the decorated officer pause, his gaze locked on the woman they had dismissed moments ago. Confusion rippled through them. Why would someone like him, whose very presence demanded respect, freeze in place for her? Jack took a step forward, then another, his boots echoing against the tile until the sound swallowed the space. He approached with the kind of reverence usually reserved for memorial walls or folded flags. The recruits stiffened, unsure whether to move aside or stay still. Anna kept painting, as if she hadn't noticed the shift in air around her, though her eyes flicked once toward the man approaching. Calm, steady, unreadable. When Jack finally stopped at her side, the silence in the corridor thickened. He didn't look at the recruits, nor the others lingering nearby. His eyes remained on her wrist, on the faint lines of ink that still told a story. His voice, when it came, was low but clear enough for every ear to hear. "That tattoo," he said, not a question but a recognition. His voice carried the weight of memory, of men dragged from jungle floors, of medevacs called in the dark, of blood washed away by rivers. "You served with us." Anna lowered her arm, the sleeve falling back into place, covering the ink once more. She did not confirm or deny, only set her brush back into the paint and lifted it again with the same steady hand. The recruits looked from one to the other, confusion growing into unease. They didn't understand the language spoken without words, the reverence of a decorated seal for an aging woman in paint-stained clothes. But Jack Harlan understood, and the respect in his stance was louder than any reprimand. The room stilled around them, the weight of the moment pressing down until even the whispers died away. For the first time, the recruits began to wonder who she truly was. Jack Harlan's voice broke the silence like a blade through glass. It wasn't loud, but it carried, every syllable weighted with respect. "Ma'am, where did you serve?" His question was simple, yet the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Anna paused, her paintbrush hovering just above the door. For a moment she looked at the faded green surface as though searching for an answer there. Then she set the brush back into the bucket and straightened her shoulders. Her eyes lifted to meet Jack's, calm but unflinching. The recruits shifted, craning their necks to hear. Curiosity prickled through them, their earlier mockery replaced by something else, something they couldn't quite name yet. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but carried the gravity of memory. "Kandahar, Fallujah, Basra. Before that, I was in Mogadishu." Each name landed like a stone in water, rippling outward, places they'd read about in textbooks or heard in passing during briefings. To hear them spoken so plainly, as if they were stops along a road she had walked, was something else entirely. She let the silence hang before continuing. "I was embedded with SEAL teams, not for months, for years. We went where the medevacs couldn't, where the air was too hot, where a single light could give away a position." One of the recruits swallowed hard, his earlier smirk gone. Another shifted his weight as if the floor had suddenly become unsteady beneath him. Anna's gaze softened, though her words grew sharper in detail. There were nights in the jungle where I stitched men together by flashlight, my hands shaking, not because I was afraid but because I hadn't slept in 3 days. There were mornings when I carried men heavier than me across rivers, bullets snapping overhead, praying the current wouldn't take us both. Her eyes weren't distant as she spoke. They were clear, steady, as if she could still see it all with frightening precision. I wrote letters for boys who couldn't hold a pen anymore. I held the hands of soldiers too young to die and promised them they'd make it home, even when I knew they wouldn't. My uniform was covered in blood more nights than it was clean. The recruits stood frozen. They had mocked her cardigan, her scuffed shoes, her paint-stained hands. But now those same hands took shape in their minds, holding gauze against mortal wounds, pressing chests to keep hearts beating, pulling brothers from the dirt. Jack nodded slowly, his expression heavy with recognition. "That tattoo," he said quietly, gesturing toward her wrist. "It isn't decoration." Anna gave a small shake of her head. "No, it's a code. It meant I was trusted to be there when no one else could be. It marked me as a medic who went where even doctors wouldn't go. It wasn't about glory. It was about keeping someone breathing until dawn." The hall remained hushed. Even those who had tried to avert their eyes earlier now stared openly, ashamed of their ignorance yet unable to look away. Anna did not ask for their respect, nor did she seem to expect it. She simply turned back to her brush, dipped it into the bucket, and set a stroke of paint across the wood with the same steady hand that had once pressed life back into broken bodies. The recruits saw the motion differently now. The quiet woman painting barracks doors was no longer invisible. She was a shadow from their own future, proof of what sacrifice looked like when the noise faded and only duty remained. Jack Harlan stood with his hands clasped loosely behind his back, his gaze sweeping the recruits who had only minutes ago been snickering. His voice was steady, deep, and unyielding as it rolled through the corridor. "This woman kept my team breathing when we should have died." The words fell heavy, striking harder than any drill instructor's shout. The recruits froze, their eyes darting between the decorated SEAL commander and the woman in the paint-flecked cardigan. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of their own shame. Moments earlier, they had dismissed her as nothing more than a janitor of doors, a tired civilian doing menial work. Now, with a single sentence, their world tilted. Ana Reyes did not look up. She dipped her brush into the bucket and laid another slow, even stroke across the wood. Her face was calm, her posture steady. She did not bask in Jack's words, nor did she diminish them. She simply kept working, her silence speaking louder than any self-defense ever could. Jack stepped closer, his expression sharpening. "You think your uniforms make you soldiers," he said, his eyes narrowing on the young men. "But uniforms can be issued to anyone. Respect isn't stitched into the fabric. It's earned. And this woman," he paused, gesturing toward Anna, "earned more of it than most of us ever will." The recruits shifted uneasily, their pride crumbling under the weight of his rebuke. One of them, the same who had mocked her shuffle, lowered his gaze to the floor, shame burning across his face. Another swallowed hard, his jaw tightening as though the words had landed like a punch to the gut. Still, Anna painted, as though untouched by the moment. The brush whispered across the surface, leaving behind a sheen of fresh color, a small act of restoration in a world that had once stripped her of recognition. She didn't need to demand their apology. She didn't need to glare, to raise her voice, or to prove herself. Dignity, she knew, was not something handed out. It was something you refused to surrender. One by one, the recruits began to move. The first approached with hesitant steps, his voice low but sincere. "Ma'am, I'm sorry." Anna gave him a brief nod, her expression unchanged, then turned her eyes back to the door. The next followed, then the next, each mumbling their own apology not only for the words they had spoken, but for their blindness to what stood before them. Jack watched in silence, letting the moment stretch, letting the lesson carve itself into their memory. When the last recruit had stepped back, unsure what else to do, Jack reached forward. Without asking, he gently took the brush from Anna's hand. For a moment he stood beside her, dipping the bristles into the bucket, then laid a single stroke across the door. The sound was soft, almost reverent, the stroke neat and careful. He handed the brush back to her, his voice low but firm. Respect is not given because of rank. It's given because it's earned. Don't ever forget that. The recruits straightened, their faces solemn, their earlier arrogance stripped away. What they had witnessed would linger long after this moment, carried into every mission, every deployment, every test of character that lay ahead. Anna accepted the brush without a word and continued painting, her movements as steady as ever. She did not ask for reverence, she did not need it. The truth had been revealed, and that was enough. The recruits stood a little taller, not out of pride, but out of newfound understanding. Strength, they realized, often walked quietly, hidden in plain sight, marked not by loudness, but by scars and ink, by silence and survival. And that day, they learned a lesson they would carry into the heart of every battlefield. True respect is not commanded, it is earned, and once earned, it endures.